Okay, so get this. We're diving into Peter Attia's Outlive, and wow, this book does not disappoint.
It's intense, right? It's like he's throwing down a challenge to rethink aging, like completely.
Totally. He's all about not just living longer, but like actually thriving in those extra years. What's that term he uses?
The Centenarian Decathlon.
Yes.
Uh,
Okay, I'm already hooked, but let's back up a sec. We're drowning in anti-aging advice these days. What makes Attia's take different?
he's not messing around with those vague guidelines we've all heard before. Addie is like, nope, we need a personalized game plan. He even compares it to a ship navigating dangerous waters.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this ship analogy.
So picture this, the four horsemen of aging: heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, and the big kahuna metabolic dysfunction. They're like icebergs waiting to sink our longevity ship.
Okay, dodging those is priority number one, but Attia says traditional medicine isn't really helping us out here, is he?
No, not really. He's pretty critical of how medicine today is so focused on reacting to problems instead of preventing them in the first place.
Yeah. It's like waiting for the ship to practically crack in half before trying to fix it instead of just, building it stronger to begin with.
Exactly. And that's where his take on something like heart disease really flips the script.
Okay, let's talk heart health. We've all heard cholesterol is bad, but Adia digs deeper, right? He says it's not so much about the cholesterol we eat, it's about these things called ApoB particles.
Right. It's like Outlive goes from interesting to, wait, I need to write this down. Imagine your arteries are like highways. Okay. Now picture those ApoB particles as these beat up trucks spewing out exhaust and just destroying the road as they go.
Okay, that's a visual I can get behind. So just counting the trucks, that's like only looking at our total cholesterol. It doesn't show the whole picture. We need to know how much damage those ApoB trucks are causing.
Exactly. And the damage happens over time, right? Like way before you see the effects. So by the time your doctor sees the damage, it's kind of too late. That's why ADS says measuring your ApoB levels early is key. It's like checking for exhaust fumes before the potholes even form.
That's a game changer. It's like Adia is giving us X-ray vision into our own health.
And here's the kicker. Even if you're prone to those beat-up trucks because of genetics, you're not doomed. Adia is big on this idea that genes aren't destiny.
Okay, tell me more about that, because I think a lot of us feel like, well, heart disease runs in my family, so.
Yeah, Adia says that's old school thinking. He says genes might lay the groundwork, but our lifestyle choices, those are what determine if those genes actually become a problem. He even talks about how he had his own wake-up call in his 30s.
Wait, really? He was young and fit and thought he was healthy, but...
He got a heart scan, and it showed he was actually headed for trouble.
Whoa, plot twist. So what did he do?
He got serious about those lifestyle factors, and that's where things get really interesting. Because Adia's approach to things like exercise and nutrition is kind of revolutionary.
Okay, I am here for this revolution. Let's do it.
He says we got to stop thinking about exercise as just like calorie burning and more about building resilience, like literally strengthening our longevity ship.
Okay, I'm into it. So how do we build that longevity hull?
He's all about a two-pronged approach. Right. So endurance training and strength training, but like with a twist.
Okay, lay it on me.
So for endurance, he's all about this thing called zone 2 training. It's not about like dying on the treadmill. It's more about finding that pace where you're working hard, but you can still like hold a conversation.
Okay. That makes sense with his whole thriving, not just surviving thing. I feel like I've heard of zone 2 before, though. Is there anything different about how Attia talks about it?
Yeah, he gets super specific about it. He even gives like actual time goals for how long we should be aiming for in zone 2 based on our age. It's interesting, though, because he actually suggests spending more time in this zone as we age, not less.
Huh. So it's like, don't slow down, just find a pace you can keep up, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that he's not afraid to challenge those old ways of thinking.
Okay, so we've got endurance, but what about the strength training side of things?
Attia says we need to shift our focus from just lifting heavy to building functional strength. So it's less about how much you can bench press and more about being able to like move through the world easily. He actually has this idea called the Centenarian Decathlon.
Wait, the what?
The Centenarian Decathlon.
Oh.
And it's so cool. It's like he asks us to picture what we want to be doing in our later years. You know, hiking with grandkids, traveling, maybe even dancing at our great-grandkids' weddings.
Okay, now those are some goals.
Right. And the Centenarian Decathlon is all about training for that. So being able to get up off the floor, easily carry groceries, climb stairs, without keeling over. It's about having a body that can actually keep up with you.
I love that so much more than just trying to fit into some arbitrary clothing size. It's like, what's the point of living longer if you can't enjoy it, right?
Exactly. Which actually brings us to another big piece of Attia's approach, and one that I think a lot of people overlook: sleep. He calls sleep the underrated superhero of longevity. And he's not wrong.
Okay, before we get to sleep, I need to hear more about this whole genes are not your destiny thing, especially when it comes to cancer. I feel like that's a big one where people feel like they're just doomed if it runs in their family.
I hear you. And it's interesting because when it comes to cancer, Attia really dives into the science of metabolic health.
Yeah.
He's basically saying that while you might be predisposed to certain things, it's often your metabolism that dictates whether those genes actually get switched on.
Okay, so back up for me. What exactly do we mean by metabolism here, and how does that tie into cancer?
Think of your metabolism like your body's energy control center. So it's how your cells actually use the energy from the food you eat. It's like your cells are little cars that can run on different types of fuel, sugar or fat.
Okay, so how does this affect cancer?
Well, the thing is, cancer cells, they love sugar. They thrive on it. And they're really good at hijacking your metabolism to get more of it.
So you're saying like a diet high in sugar could actually be fueling cancer cells?
It's definitely more nuanced than that. But basically, yeah, if your metabolism's out of whack, meaning your body's constantly flooded with insulin because it's become resistant, you're basically creating a breeding ground for those sugar-loving cancer cells.
Okay, that's both fascinating and kind of terrifying. So what's the takeaway? Should we all be swearing off sugar completely?
It's not about eliminating sugar entirely, but more about keeping your metabolic health in check. And that's where Attia's whole approach to nutrition comes in. He's a big proponent of what he calls personalized nutrition, which is basically figuring out what works best for your unique metabolism.
So it's less about following some generic diet and more about learning what works for your body.
Exactly. He's even into using things like continuous glucose monitoring, those CGMs, so you can actually see how your blood sugar responds to different foods.
You're like having a window into your own metabolism. That's wild.
It really is. And it just highlights how much power we have to influence our health. But speaking of influencing our health, we can't forget about the other horsemen lurking out there.
All right, we've got to keep our eyes on those icebergs. What about Alzheimer's? That feels like another one where we're just kind of at the mercy of our genes.
Well, Attia is really upfront about the fact that we still don't have it all figured out when it comes to Alzheimer's. But he does point out the areas where we do have some control, and it goes back to that longevity ship analogy.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me how to keep my brain ship from going adrift.
So there's this gene called APOE. And it basically plays a role in how well our brains clear out cellular waste. Think of it like your brain's garbage disposal system. Now, there are different versions of this gene, and some versions are like having a really crappy garbage disposal.
So if you inherit that faulty gene, are you basically guaranteed to get Alzheimer's?
Here's the good news. Attia says not necessarily. He stresses that even with a genetic predisposition, there are things we can do to improve our brain's garbage disposal system and potentially lower our risk.
Okay, now you've got my attention. What are these brain-boosting strategies?
It kind of goes back to everything else we've talked about, diet, sleep, managing inflammation. But there's also a fascinating connection between oral health and brain health.
Wait, what? Oral health? You're saying like brushing and flossing can help ward off Alzheimer's?
Yeah. It turns out the bacteria that causes gum disease can actually release toxins that travel to your brain.
Wow, okay. I'm definitely stepping up my flossing game now. It all goes back to that idea that it's all connected, right? What's good for the body is good for the brain.
100%. And just like with cancer, Attia talks about how managing our metabolic health is super important for brain health too. He explains that when your brain doesn't have the energy it needs because of things like insulin resistance, it can actually damage brain cells and increase your risk of cognitive decline.
Man, it's amazing how intertwined all of this stuff is. But this whole optimizing our metabolism thing feels like a really important piece of the longevity puzzle.
It's huge. But let's circle back to that other underrated superhero. Attia talks about sleep.
Yes. Tell me why sleep is about so much more than just not being tired.
So Attia dedicates a whole chapter to sleep in Outlive, and for good reason. He argues that so many of us are walking around sleep-deprived, and we don't even realize the toll it's taking on our bodies and brains.
Okay, so make the case for sleep. Why is it so essential?
Well, it turns out sleep isn't just about giving our bodies a break. It's actually when our brains do a lot of their repair and maintenance work. So during sleep, our brains are clearing out toxins, consolidating memories, even strengthening our immune systems.
Wow, so it's like a nightly tune-up for our brains. What happens when we don't give ourselves that time?
Basically, our brains don't get the chance to fully recharge, and over time that can lead to all sorts of problems from, brain fog and memory issues to even more serious things like an increased risk of Alzheimer's, heart disease, and even metabolic dysfunction.
Yikes. So skimping on sleep is like neglecting the upkeep on our longevity ship. We're basically setting ourselves up for trouble down the line.
Exactly. And Attia doesn't just tell us to sleep more. He actually gives us really specific strategies for improving our sleep quality. Like, he emphasizes how important it is to create a sleep sanctuary in your bedroom. So making sure it's cool, dark, quiet, and sticking to a consistent sleep schedule even on the weekends.
Yeah, that's always the hard part. I know he also talks about how it's not just about the quantity of sleep, but the quality, right? Like, are we getting enough of those deep sleep cycles?
Yes. He breaks down why those deep sleep and REM cycles are so crucial for memory consolidation and brain repair.
It's wild to think about how much is happening while we're just snoozing away. But what about people who have trouble sleeping? Does he offer any advice for those of us who struggle with insomnia or other sleep disorders?
He does. He talks about things like cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia and addressing any underlying medical conditions that might be interfering with sleep. He's also a big fan of using those sleep trackers to figure out where you can make improvements.
So it's about being proactive about our sleep, just like with exercise and nutrition. But we've covered so much ground here. Exercise, nutrition, sleep, even flossing our way to better brain health. It feels like a lot to juggle.
It can feel overwhelming, but that's why I think Attia's approach is so helpful. He gives us a framework for putting it all together. He calls it Medicine 3.0.
Okay, Medicine 3.0. I'm intrigued. What's so revolutionary about it?
It's about moving away from this reactive approach to health.
Mm.
Just treating symptoms and shifting to a more proactive model. So identifying and mitigating risks early on.
So instead of waiting for our longevity ship to break down, we're constantly doing maintenance and making sure everything's running smoothly.
Exactly. And that involves looking at our health more holistically. So considering not just the physical, but also the emotional and even the existential aspects of aging.
So it's about living better, not just longer, adding life to our years and not just years to our life.
100%. And that actually brings us to one of the most powerful but often overlooked aspects of longevity, emotional health.
So we're talking like mental health, resilience, that kind of thing. It's all connected to this longevity thing, isn't it?
Totally, yeah. Attia says it's like having a good captain steering your longevity ship.
Yeah.
Someone who can weather the storms.
I love that. So how can we all become better captains of our own health, so to speak?
Well, Attia actually gets really candid in the book about his own struggles with anger and how it was affecting his health. And he's big on therapy, mindfulness, anything that can help build self-awareness and emotional resilience.
I feel like that's so important because we get so caught up in all the physical stuff that we forget about the mental and emotional side of things. It's all connected, right?
It really is. And Attia doesn't just talk about this stuff in a vague, be happier kind of way. He actually connects things like chronic stress and negativity to real physical changes in our bodies.
Okay, so explain that to me. How does stress actually impact our health, like on a cellular level?
So basically, when we're stressed, our bodies pump out all these hormones,
Yeah.
right? Cortisol is the big one. And in small doses, it's fine. But if it's constantly flowing, it's like your body's stuck in overdrive. And that leads to inflammation, messed up insulin signaling, a whole cascade of problems. It can even impact our brain health, speeding up cognitive decline.
It's wild how interconnected everything is, but it sounds like Attia's message is actually pretty hopeful, like we have more control than we think.
100%. He's basically giving us the owner's manual to our own bodies, showing how everything from our sleep to our relationships matters.
Speaking of relationships, I know Attia talks a lot about the power of community and how those connections are so important for longevity.
Absolutely. He's got studies galore showing that people who have close relationships tend to live longer, healthier lives.
Yeah.
And it's not just about having a bunch of Facebook friends, you know. It's about those deep, meaningful connections that make us feel supported, loved.
Yeah, it's about knowing you're not alone in this, having people to celebrate the good times and help you through the tough times.
Exactly. And Attia stresses that those kinds of relationships don't just happen magically. We have to put in the effort, nurture those bonds, make time for loved ones, find ways to connect with our community.
So it's about actively investing in our social well-being, just like we invest in our physical and emotional health. It's all part of that holistic approach.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the role technology plays in all of this. Attia is a big believer in using tech to track our health, personalize our approaches, and even target specific aging pathways.
It's like having a high-tech control panel for our longevity ship. We can see what needs adjusting, what's working, all that good stuff.
Precisely. He's really excited about things like CGMs, fitness trackers, even the potential of AI to create personalized health plans.
It's pretty amazing to think about what's possible, right? But with all this talk about living longer, what about the ethical side of things?
Yeah. That's a really good point, and Attia definitely acknowledges those concerns. He knows that as we push the boundaries of longevity, we have to think about things like access to these advancements and the potential impact on social equality.
Yeah, those are big questions. It's good to know he's thinking about that stuff. It's a good reminder that longevity isn't just a scientific pursuit, it's a societal one, too.
Exactly. And in the end, it's about using these advancements in a responsible, ethical way to create a future where everyone has the opportunity to live a longer, healthier, more fulfilling life.
Well said. As we wrap up this deep dive into Outlive, I'm struck by how Attia manages to be both incredibly optimistic about the future of longevity, but also so grounded in the science. He doesn't shy away from the big questions or the fact that we still have a lot to learn.
I totally agree. He's definitely inspiring, but also realistic. He empowers us to take control of our own health, but also recognizes that there are some things we can't control.
And that's okay, right? Because I think his message is really about focusing on what we can control, the choices we make every day, our mindsets, and being open to learning new things.
Perfectly put. I think the biggest takeaway from Outlive is that it's not about adding years to our lives. It's about adding life to our years.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This deep dive has been incredible, and I don't know about you, but I'm walking away feeling pretty inspired and maybe a little bit younger.
Me too. It reminds us that there's always more to learn, and the future of longevity is bright. But ultimately, it's up to each of us to take this knowledge and create a life we love, no matter how long it lasts.